And at the end, we're going to have some time for Q&A. So, if you have something longer that you could ask Scott at the end, that would be great too. And we hope you do have a lot of questions. Also, I might interrupt Scott if I see in the chat box that something needs clarification as to what he's saying, okay? But let me introduce Scott. I know many of you know him already. Scott is our town historian. He grew up in Ossining. He was on the Ossining Police Department for 32 years. He has a master's in American history and is a board member of the Ossining Historical Society. Like I said, he's the town historian. He's done that for 2 years, and he's been at the library for 3 years. He is responsible here for our local history collection and many other duties. So welcome, Scott. Give me 1 second to share the screen so that we can see his slides. And I'm going to do that right now. So you might want to pin Scott, okay? And then we're going to have his slides. Can everyone see his slides? Just thumbs up or something. Great. Very good. Thanks. All right, Scott.
All righty. Thanks for joining me today. I see a lot of people here today. I see that Swansea, New Hampshire is represented. That's nice to see. I'm glad you all came. We're doing this as part of a larger series of programs about Ossining, and they were nice enough to allow me to do this today. And we're going to talk about Ossining immigration. And we've been in Ossining people have been here for a long time, longer than people were in Ossining carrying on their daily business before the Indus Valley was civilized, that long. And it's great. And, I joke with my wife, she's a big international traveler, that she's like a Italy, England kind of traveler. I'm like a Montana, Wyoming kind of traveler. And she's always getting on me about that. And listen, I don't have to go see the world. The world comes to Ossining to see me. And it's cool in that respect. And it's one of the things I've always enjoyed about it. One of the things in the 2010 census that they identified was in 2010, the government came out and said the old immigration patterns were broken and that immigrants were no longer coming into the country and going into the cities. They were going directly to the suburbs. That's nothing new for us. It's been like that forever. Largely because of large infrastructure programs that were done up here, like the dams and the aqueduct, that desperately needed workers. So we had a lot of immigration that came directly to Ossining right off the get-go, and that's pretty cool. But everybody here is an immigrant. And, I talk about Ossining. Ossining is defined in many different ways. I mean, we all know there's the village, there's the town. Here at the library, we are a school district library. So our definition of the Ossining community is the Ossining School District. And that includes the village of Ossining, the town of Ossining, parts of Barcliff Manor, parts of Newcastle, and a small part of Yorktown. So depending on how you define Ossining, we're all kind of in this together, and we're going to talk about it in general. One of the new communities, Ossining communities, I think is really cool is because of things like social media, all these Ossining expats who live all over the country and all over the world are coming back on and talking about their experiences here and sharing pictures that I've never before. And it's been great. I've learned so much from people who are living as far away as Colorado and New Hampshire and things like that. So that's kind of another Ossining community that's kind of been new, and it's been great. I really like it. It's part of what I enjoy doing during the day is seeing what people have posted about Ossining, and it's always interesting. So I hope people keep doing that. Mr. Oshner was always a fan of saying that history is in your attic. And now people who are going to their attics in Colorado and finding stuff about Ossining and sharing it with all of us, which is really neat, really neat. We come, all of us, from someplace else. We come from many different places. New Bern or Windsor, North Carolina, Sassanora, Italy, Cuenca, or Giron, Ecuador. And of course, that thriving metropolis of the Atlantic Maritime provinces, Digby, Nova Scotia, the few, the proud. So we all come from someplace. My point is, we all have a story. You might not be one of the three groups I'm talking about today, but you have a story, and it's an interesting one. My wife used to take her kids to teach her down at Ellis Island, and she called me once on the phone. She goes, "Hey, I'm down Ellis Island. Do you want me to look up your Washington Heights? Do you want me to look up your ancestors on the wall here?" I'm like, "Yeah, when we came over, we thought the government was kind of busy, so we didn't want to bother them. So we kind of slunk in the back door here into Maine. So you are not going to find my family's name up there. But we all have a story. We all come from somewhere. The thing that's great about this, all get to share each other's stories, and they're really good. But we've been here for a long time. See, when I was growing up, this is what cavemen look like. And this is what I figured at one point, you sliding off the back of the dinosaur, all that kind of stuff. This is where we all came from. Actually, sadly, that's actually not true. Really, this isn't true either. We didn't live here a million years ago. We weren't eaten by dinosaurs. Rockefeller didn't have a fur bikini, and none of these folks were battling Tyrannosaurus rexes on North Highland Avenue. They weren't here a million years ago. They were here about 10, 11, 12,000 years ago. If this poster looks familiar, it's not because you saw the movie in 1966. It's because this is the poster that Andy Dufresne covers the hole in his cell with when he crawls out of the Shawshank prison in the Shawshank Redemption. But no, they didn't sadly look like this. They actually look like this. These folks are what they call Paleo-Indians. Paleo-Indians have been living in the Northeast here for 10, 12, 13,000 years ago. 20,000 years ago, there was 1,000 feet of ice where we're sitting right now. As the ice receded, people came up and filled that. This is a diorama that's done in the New York Museum, which is excellent. And this is actually a location in Orange County near Stewart Air Force Base where they found this Paleo-Indian site. And these folks are as people as you and I. You could take one of these guys, give them a haircut, put some jeans and a t-shirt on them, and walk them down North Highland Avenue, and you wouldn't give them a second look until he, chucked a spear through the windshield of your truck. It's they've been here a long time. One of the places they've found slight remnants of the actual Paleo-Indians is the Piping Rock site, which is up on North Highland Avenue, where near Kemmy's Cove is today. They found some of the rocks and things they did. Believe it or not, 10,000 years ago, there were no bows and arrows. Bows and arrows are a relatively new invention. What this guy is holding is a long spear with a very, very sharp piece of rock attached to the end of it. And he's going to take it now, and he's going to stick it into a ginormous caribou or woolly mammoth or something, kill it and eat it. Pretty incredible. April 28th at 7:00, we're going to talk about wildlife here in the Hudson River Valley as a Zoom talk. And one of the things we're going to talk about is the megafauna that lived here at one point. But these guys were here, and they were existing and living right where we walk every day. If I had known or remembered that the village is in the process of a survey to change their seal, I'm not so sure I would have done this. This gets people a little exercised. It's been a point of debate in the past, but the reality of it is we are talking about the original Americans, the Native Americans, the indigenous people, the Ossining Indians who lived here at one point. Historically, as far as that symbol's concerned, not so much, but I think it's a symbol. Who am I to speak? Because I wore this on my shoulder for years. And I was an American history major, gave it a second thought. Even though I tell you that actually looks a little more like one of the village people, that village people Indian from the old group rather than the actual Indian. And I don't think that was the vibe the police were going for, but that's what they wore for many years. But ultimately, the Ossining police changed their symbol to this. Sergeant Paul Hackert was one of our sergeants. He changed our shoulder patch to reflect all the different things. There's in the upper left is the prison, and there's a double arch, and on the bottom is what purportedly is a Native American canoeing in the Hudson. I used to tell people and point it out on my shoulder, it was actually me. That was me out there paddling around the Hudson River, and that's why they put it on the patch. I think this patch has since been adopted by OVAC, and I think maybe the fire department as well. The only thing I could say is if this symbol has engendered conversation about what should be a symbol for Ossining, I think no matter how you feel, no matter how the outcome, this is a good opportunity for all of us to try and understand more about the people who lived here at one point, either way, because I didn't know anything about them. So we'll take this as an opportunity to see that. And who were they? Well, that's not such an easy question to answer. I mean, they were the Sink. That was a particular group that lived right here. That's where we get our name from. Some people thought they were the Lenape, the Mohican, the Mohegan, the Mohawk, the last of the Mohicans, the Delaware, all true, all not true. Most of the names for the original tribes that lived around here were signed to them by other people and not their own names. I mean, the Iroquois, that's not what they call themselves. I can't even pronounce what they call themselves, but that's not what they call themselves. And a lot of them were spelled phonetically 100 years after the fact. So what do we know for a fact about the original inhabitants here when Henry Hudson sailed up? We know for a fact that they were Algonquin people as opposed to Iroquoian. We know for a fact they spoke a language called Munsee. We think an affiliation or were part of the larger Lenape or Delaware tribe, but we don't know for sure. The only thing we know is they're gone, and they were pushed out very early, and a lot of the folks here, the river, what they called the River Indians at the time, moved up ultimately to Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and then ultimately they were pushed west and pushed west. Yeah, Nancy's mentioning something of the Wapagers Confederacy tribe. That may have been part of one of the groups they temporarily formed. No one can seem to agree about that, but that is one of the groups, one of the ones they call the Mohicans, and they formed the Wapagers. That's guys like Daniel Ninham, people like that. But they don't know that for a fact, and they're still a little iffy about that. Like I said, if you want to find the folks who lived here today, you'd have to go to northeastern Wisconsin to the Stockbridge Munsee Indian Reservation, where we ultimately pushed them to and where they exist today. But it is confusing. The terminology is confusing. This doesn't help this guy. James Fenimore Cooper comes around and writes The Last of the Mohicans. This guy certainly wasn't a Mohican. He actually was, if you read the book, say he is a tribe, which is the Lenape, because they say they were part of the walking patent, which is where Penn's kids stole all the land. But they weren't, Uncas and Chingachgook were not the last two members of that tribe. And I suspect that the people in Wisconsin might take umbrage to that because they're still here. So it is confusing, but it's mostly based on language. And I think that's the fairest way to do it. And, they speak, the Indians, the original Americans who were here spoke a language called Munsee. And that is how they grouped, and that's how they formed affiliations. Matter of fact, when they were pushing them west, at one brief period of time, they found a cool place and they hung out. I think it was in Indiana, until, of course, the English showed up and kicked them out again. But the English were nice enough to name the town after them just after they kicked them out. And so that's Muncie, Indiana today. So if you ever hear Muncie, Indiana, that's actually the name of the language that the folks around here used as they were heading west before they got kicked out of there. So we have a lot of these names still here. Ossining is obviously the big one. Manhattan, Havistraw, Esopus, Mamaroneck. They're all come from that time. What about the Munsey and Rock? I don't know if Munsey, Monsey, is the same as Munsey. Someone just asked that question. I don't know. No. But like I said, officially today, they are the Stockbridge Munsey Band of Mohican Indians, and they are in Northeast Wisconsin. So like I said, maybe we could take this as an opportunity to learn a little bit more about them. We have some books here in the library, and I would also strongly suggest you go to the Croton Point Nature Center. They have a great collection up there. It's an archaeology society as well. The Kiktuwank live there, also a member of the Algonquin Munsee speaking tribes. I highly recommend John Phillips up there. He's the naturalist at Croton Point. He's a wealth of information about this. He's forgotten more about this than I'll ever know. So please, if you want to learn more, and I hope you do, go on up there and take a look at what they got. The Dutch. The Dutch were only here for, well, they were only in charge for about 70 years, but they left a massive imprint on this valley. It's hard for us to imagine. It's hard for us to imagine just how important they were. But in respects, if you look at our society today, it's really more of a Dutch one than an English one. It's hyper local. It's based on, it's very inclusive. It's based on this money, not who your family was, not royalty. It's based on what can you do to make us all sure. And the Dutch were really good at that. They were great businessmen. They left a huge print on the entire world. They certainly left one here. So Henry Hudson comes here in 1609 in the Half Moon. The Half Moon comes over. Henry Hudson's an Englishman. Henry Hudson is paid by the Dutch to find a way to go to the Spice Islands of East Asia over across the top of Russia. He goes up, decides that's not really what he wants to do, hooks a hard left, essentially steals the ship, crosses the Atlantic, and tries to push his way up the Hudson River. He never goes back to England. He never goes back to, correct. He never goes back to the Netherlands. He stays in England. There is questions to this point, what he originally intended on doing. What I think is really cool is if you look at the ship, the Half Moon is the Dutch equivalent of the Jolly Roger. At the time, the Dutch were fighting with the Spanish. The Spanish were Catholic and the Dutch were Protestant. And so the Dutch had a series of pirates they called the Sea Beggars. And the reason they took this symbol, this half moon, is because the Turks were also fighting the Spanish. So they kind of felt a kinship with them because the enemy of my enemy is my friend stuff. So they would use the Turkish symbol for their pirate ships. So they would show together trying to beat the Spanish. So that's what the half moon means to the Dutch. And that's why they named this a little later. It's just an old version of what we would consider the Jolly Roger today. So I always like that. This is a reproduction of the half moon. It is now in the Netherlands. It used to be in the Hudson River. It's moved over to the Horn in the Netherlands. It's only 85 feet long. It's shorter than the Clearwater, and they crossed it. And remember, the Hudson River was not named the Hudson River by the Dutch. The Dutch had three rivers. They had the Delaware, what we call the Delaware, the Hudson, and the Connecticut. To them, it was the South River, the North River, and the Fresh River. It's not till the English take over 80 years later that they rename it the Hudson River. And until the 1920s, the old sea charts would still call the Hudson River off Manhattan the North River. So some people, if you ever hear the expression North River, they're talking about the Hudson. And I could tell you, there's a crazy person walking around Ossining who's got the North River tattooed on his calf with a sturgeon above it. He's a crazy, stay away from him. I wouldn't believe a word he said, but that's what the North River means. It's actually just another term. It's the original Dutch name for the Hudson River. You could tell this is an old picture because the Knicks are smiling. Now, these Knicks shouldn't have been smiling anyway, but talk about an imprint they left on the area. That is, those colors are the New York City colors from 1915, and they are actually based on the New Amsterdam flag of 1620 something. So when the Knicks are taking the corner, they're orange and blue and white. That's actually Dutch colors from the original Dutch flag. I'm not so sure how many people know that, but that's kind of their legacy. And their legacy is also in the names. There's a lot of names, Peekskill, and any town that name is finished with kill is Dutch, because Dutch is the Dutch word for brook is kill. We call it the Sing Sing Kill here sometimes, or the Kill Brook. The kill actually means brook in Dutch. So there are a lot of old Dutch, Wallkill, Plattekill. There are a lot of Dutch names still here in the valley, and I think it's pretty cool. Ossining has an old, historic African-American community. One of the things I learned, I recently saw there was an exhibit in February up at the Bethany Arts Center. Joyce Sherrock Cole and Donna Chambers did about Black history. It was great, and I learned so much. There has been an African-American presence in this community since at least 1625 as enslaved people who were brought over by the Dutch. But that is not an immigrant experience, and that would be inappropriate to refer to it as that. The immigrant experience, as far as I'm concerned, here in this community, start in the 1800s, as folks were escaping from slavery and moving up here. And it's a great story, and I learned a lot from Joyce about this. Joyce Sherrock Cole is the Village of Ossining historian. She is a talented researcher. She started up a group called Little Birdie Genealogical Society, and they are doing a lot of work about the folks that came up from Windsor, North Carolina, in that area. And she's really a great resource. One of the check this, May 3rd, the Sparta Jug Historical Society is doing a Zoom talk, and Joyce is speaking, and she's going to be talking a lot about Captain Lewis Brady. We'll talk about him in a minute. I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be a great talk. She really knows her stuff, and it's a story that if they did as a movie, nobody would believe it. So May 3rd, 7:30 p.m. on the Jug Tavern Zoom site. Joyce will be hosting that, and it's going to be exceptional. So when we first talk about the folks who came up here in the 1800s, the first person we got to talk about is Reverend Dewars. Reverend Dewars comes here. If you look, this is currently where just underneath the arch, just west of the double arch in the community center. That is actually Henry Dewars Circle, long overdue, Reverend Dewars Circle. If you get an opportunity to go stop there, you can read, there's a little plaque there. But Mr. Dewars, Reverend Dewars, was a big part of the African-American community when it started here. He has a great story. He fled slavery during the Civil War, joined the Union forces, fought in the Civil War, went to Richmond, Virginia, got his religious training, came up to Yonkers, ultimately comes up to New York, and creates a church here and starts the pipeline, the immigration route between northeastern Carolina, Windsor, that area where he's from, and Ossining, which continued well into the 20th century. But he was an incredible guy. He builds the Star of Bethlehem Church at what was 70 Croton Avenue, 70 Spring Street. Now then it became 148 Spring Street in 1932. There was one there earlier in 1890, but they built this larger brick structure in 1932, and now it's 148 Spring Street. It no longer is the Star, but if you look closely, if you look closely, you can see Reverend Dewar's names in one of the cornerstones. Today, I mean, a lot of people in Ossining, if you just say, where do you go to church? Oh, I go to the Star. Where are you going to be? Where's that Talk Me Hill? Oh, it's a Star. Everybody knows you're talking about the Star of Bethlehem Church that Reverend Dewars founded all those years ago. I mean, currently it is in, it's a 305, 306 Spring Street. That used to be the Ossining Hospital, or the site of the Ossining Hospital, until 1959, 60, when Phelps opens up. When I first became a cop in the 80s, it was the old hospital was there, and it was a plumbing supply warehouse. Across the street, if you want to see a vestigial remnant of the hospital, across the street is the brick structure that was the housing for the nurses for the hospital. They built this structure, I think, in 1996. It's huge, and it's got a huge parking lot. And today, if someone says, hey, where's the Star? The Star is right. That's what the Star is today in Ossining. One of my favorite families that came to Ossining in the 19th century were the Gordines. Gordines originally come up to Croton Point, and Mr. Gordine's father worked on Croton Point in the brickyards. And that's another story. But Mr. Gordine really becomes his son really becomes an icon here, and was one of my favorite all-time people, probably the ultimate Hudson River fisherman, shad fisherman. Today, that park down by the waterfront is appropriately named after him. A very cool history. Very cool history. Mr. Gordine was always hanging down at the Boat and Canoe Club. Always loved talking about the river. For years, we had an exhibit down the Ossining library down below, and we had nets, and we had a couple things like that. And one of the things we had was his famous red dress. He was fond of telling people when he was growing up as a kid, he would, in an attempt to keep him out of away from the river, his mom would make him wear a red dress so he wouldn't go down to the river. He overcame that and went anyway. He was down there for a long time. He knew everything about the river. If you ever have an opportunity, there's a local filmmaker and historian named Ken Sargent out of Peekskill, and he did a great video about Mr. Gordine, and you get an opportunity to see him talk and tell some of his stories. Really a treasure here in the valley. You know, it's hard for us to believe today that Ossining was a commercial fishing place, but it absolutely was. Until probably the early 1970s. People, you can go down to the Middle Dock, or you can go down to Sparta, and they would weigh your shad right there on a scale hung off the tree. But that's another story. But Ossining was a fishing town, hard as it may seem to believe. And sadly, to some degree, we've lost most of the guys who were commercial fishermen anyway. We still got some real fish assassins in this community, but they don't do it commercially, and they're not looking for shad, they're looking for stripers that are out there right now. But these older guys who spent time on the river, they were tough. It was a dangerous job. They knew the river in a way that we just don't, and that's too bad. Sorry we lost that. But you get an opportunity to read Ken Sargent's, or check out Ken Sargent's YouTube on Mr. Gordine. It's really good. Captain Lewis Brady. That's not Captain Lewis Brady. That's George Washington. But Captain Lewis Brady, one of my favorite Ossining figures, grew up on that plantation as a slave. He grew up on that plantation. He ultimately, in the War of 1812, he's owned by a man named Zabriskie. He's a colonel. and he fights in the War of 1812 as Zabriskie's bodyman. So he's goes up, that's Fort McHenry around Baltimore. He's down in that area. After the war, Lewis Brady is given to his niece, whose husband is going to sell him. So he escapes and he comes north to what's the village of Sing Sing, but is Ossining today. This is the gentleman that Joyce is going to do the talk about in May. It's just unbelievable. We all know his house. This is right down there by the Scarborough Apartments. Just to the right, that little cottage, and that's what it's called, the Captain's Cottage, built in 1805. That's where he lived. And he had a sloop and he had an oyster business. And he was, because of his ship, he was referred to as Captain Brady. He's the oldest man buried in Sparta Cemetery. When he passed, he was 108. Unbelievable. What a born into slavery, dies in Ossining in the 1880s, a captain of a ship. Just an incredible story. I'm really looking forward to seeing Joyce talk about it. But if you ever walk by that little house there, you can see it says the Captain's Cottage on it. If you get a chance, I'm hoping that the Sparta Historical Society, the Jug Tavern, has an opportunity to do their walks again. Before all this craziness started, you can go down there, usually it was Sunday afternoons, and you go walk around, you do a walking tour of Sparta. It's a great place for a walking tour, and they really do it well. And this is one of the places they talk about. So if in fact Jug Tavern starts doing those again, by all means, take advantage of them. They're great. They really are. The real immigrant experience for the African-American community is what they call the Great Northern Migration. It's not called immigration because it's within one country, but we're talking millions and millions of African Americans left the Southeast between 1916 and 1970 and came to the Northeast, came to the Chicago area, went to the West Coast for job opportunities and to get away from Jim Crow laws. And like a lot of these foreign immigration patterns, they follow the same footprint. So what happens is one person will come here from Sassanora, Italy, or Windsor, North Carolina, or Yaron, Ecuador, establish themselves, bring family, friends, and you get this pipeline between these places. And that's what happened here. Reverend Dewars comes here. He's from Windsor, North Carolina. He starts this relationship. And because of that, a lot of the folks here from the historic African-American community are from Eastern North Carolina. Bertie County, Windsor, Ahoskie, Woburn, all through there. My old partner had family in Ahoskie. There is a little birdie genealogical society that works here. And one of the really interesting things about this particular area of North Carolina is this is where the Tuscarora Indians were, Native Americans. This is where they were. And then in late 1700s, they were getting squeezed so hard, they left here and joined the Iroquois Nation as the 6th Iroquois Nation and traveled up into upstate New York. And there was a relationship in this part of North Carolina between the folks who were enslaved and the Native Americans who were there. And I think the Genealogical Society is doing research and work on that. And it's really interesting. A lot of the names from Bertie County, I know all these folks who came up here originally and stayed and became an important part of our community. The Genealogical Society has a list 3 times as long as this. It's pretty cool. They do some interesting work. They really do. Sassanora, Italy. Between 1880 and 1920, 4 million Italians immigrated here. 4 million Italians came here. They are today, I think, the 5th largest ethnic group. Someone told me Sasonora, Italy is a small town 35 miles northeast of Naples in southern Italy. And a lot of the immigration that came to the United States back then around the turn of the century was to build large infrastructure. Like a lot of the folks who came here from Italy in around 1900 were from the New Croton Dam, which was completed in 1906. It's pretty incredible. It's apparently just crushing poverty in southern Italy and Sicily, and that really spurred the immigration movement. All come out, and a lot of the folks from Sasonora come here. And when they originally come here, they come to what we call the hop. That's that part of Route 9 directly behind, or directly below the library here. It's where a lot of immigrant groups first come. It is at one point it was called Spaghetti Flats, and there was the Italian bakery there, which ultimately becomes the Portuguese bakery. But it became a big deal. The first Ossining cop, Italian Ossining cop, was a man named Peter Florian. His real name was Pietro Floriano, but when he changed, he anglicized his name, which was not uncommon back then. I'm sure the vast majority back then of the police department was Irish, and Peter Florian probably fit a little better. If you ever see that movie, The Untouchables, when they go to recruit the kid out of the academy and they go, "What's your name?" You go, "Oh, John Smith." "No, what's your real name?" And it was something long in Italian. That was common back then. That was common back then. Today, if you go down, you can see the Columbus Lodge is there. That was built in the 1920s, even though in 1909, the Protective Society already existed. Understand this, and they were given a hard, like all immigrant groups, they were given a hard time. And when they came, a lot of us know the Squire House directly across from Ossining High School, that fancy house, the old cement house with the spires and stuff. Amos Squire lived there at the turn of the century. He was the Sing Sing doctor. He was also the Westchester County coroner. And by all accounts, he was a pretty progressive guy and didn't believe in the death penalty, even though he oversaw it. Well, as the county coroner, while they were building the New Croton Dam, they had a homicide next to in a small house next to what they call Croton Lake at the time. So Amos Squire, as the county coroner, went up there to investigate it. And the first thing he did was he told the cop to round up every Italian they could find within 5 miles. And they did. They brought 30 Italians to him. He put 26 of them in jail until he figured out what happened. That was not uncommon back then. So places like the Columbus Lodge were organized in an attempt to help out the community, because the community was, like most immigrant groups, not treated the same. You can go down there and see it today. I, quite frankly, have never been in it, but it's still an ongoing group today. This is Sasonora, Italy, thanks to Google Earth. I have been told that there are more Sasonorans in Ossining, in the Ossining area, than there is in Sasonora today. I think there's only 600 people in Sasonora today. So there are actually more Sasonorans here. We do have an ongoing relationship with them. Today, if you go down Main Street, that little triangle in the middle is actually called Sasonora Plaza. And they are considered our sister city. So they're right there in the middle. There are a lot of old Italian families in town. A lot of them are from Sasonora. If you are from Ossining, you know some of these names, including some folks who work right here in the library. One of the things one of the things that, when I'm getting some questions, I'm just taking a look at it. One of the things I love about living in an immigrant community is the food. Boy, there is some fantastic food in Ossining of all manner and variety. And boy, I hope if you live here, you sure take advantage of it, because all these different groups that have come here brought their food with them, and it's really great. It's really great. When I joined the Ossining Police Department, I think ultimately we had 3 guys that spoke fluent Portuguese. At one point, the Ossining Police Department, which did its best, the Chief Burton certainly did its best to reflect the community. At one point, we spoke 9 separate languages for 65 cops. That's a lot, but that really is reflective of the community. And Portuguese is one of them. Portuguese is a big deal here in Ossining. Great food. Usually the weekend after the village fair, they used to do a Portuguese festival. I never missed it. The only thing I could say in Portuguese is obrigado. And I do know that the guys in the police department who spoke Spanish used to say the Portuguese guys were the zhuzh guys. So I guess it's kind of like Spanish, but with a lot of zhuzhs in it. They have a strong community here. They have a good soccer team. This is not it, but I used to watch them play. And if you want to see the Portuguese, where the the group is, you can go down Waller Avenue, and that's the Portuguese club right there. That is originally the first synagogue in Ossining, and ultimately it moves up and becomes CSI up on Pleasantville Road. But today on Waller Avenue, it is the Portuguese club. See the big satellite dish up there. When I first became a police officer, they told me that if you want to know where the Portuguese live, just look for satellite dishes. It's the only way they could watch European soccer. So, and that is kind of true. But today we get it all over now. But it is a strong tradition here. If you go down to the waterfront and get an opportunity to look at that sculpture there, that is actually from Portugal. That is from one of our sister cities, Alijo, I think it's pronounced. I know back then, 2000, in the 2000s. Oh, okay. In the 2000s, it said that we gave some of our turnout gear to them. The fire department got together and made a donation to some of the fire department over there in Portugal. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So we have a strong back and forth relationship with Portugal. It's pretty cool. Your own Ecuador, just outside of Cuenca, in the province of Ajuay, which is the southern part of Ecuador. The first folks that I remember, when the South Americans really started immigrating to Ossining, there were a lot of folks from this area, and at the time, a lot of them spoke a language, or were able to speak a language called Quechua or Quechua. Quechua is an Incan dialect. The Ossining Library is in the process of trying to get our hands on a Quechua dictionary. It's kind of cool. It's spoken in both Ecuador and Peru. And the folks from Ossining who lived in around Cuenca and Huron, the folks spoke Quechua. And we were told at the time that when growing up in Huron, or one of these little villages there, you learned Quechua in home, you learned Spanish when you went to school, and then you learned English when you came to Ossining. So you always try and bear that in mind. You know, I'm struggling with language number 1. These folks were on language 3, but it is a strong culture here. Cuenca itself is a UNESCO city. It's a hop. It is supposedly beautiful. When on patrol, you could walk up and down Spring Street, and there were signs posted on the telephone poles offering rentals in Cuenca. Today, I'm told you can go on Craigslist in Ossining and also see places to rent and go to in Cuenca. It's pretty cool. I've never been there. I'd like to go sometime. They, this is what people call the Panama hat. It's actually Ecuadorian, and this is what they were famous for in Ajuay, in that province. These are woven. They're foldable. There's a whole culture around them. They're called Panama hats for a bunch of reasons, including the fact that the world happened to be passing through Panama, not Ecuador. So the best place to sell them to other people was there. So that's what they did. Then Teddy Roosevelt famously went down there while they were digging the canal and they had a picture of him sitting in some steam shovel wearing one of these Panama hats. So they call them Panama hats, but they're really Ecuadorian. One of the reasons people in Ossining know about the Ecuadorian community was originally Stations of the Cross. Good Friday before Easter, part of the faith and the culture was to make a public walk or parade to different places where different families hosted different Stations of the Cross. And we'd start at St. Anne's and we would lead them on this convoluted course of the village, and there were a couple thousand people at one point. Today, I don't think it's as big because a lot of communities do it. But back then, Ossining was the only one that was allowing them to do it. So we had tons of people here, and it was pretty incredible to see. They also do a Christmas thing. I don't know if it's still done in Ossining. I hope so. That was a big part of we were always involved with that, and it was always an experience. There we go. Starting from the St. Anne's school lot. Never a dull moment. And it was always fun, and it was always interesting. Today, if you want to some of the more common names from that portion of Ecuador you find here in Ossining, here, Tenasaca, Morocho, Junin, Quispe, I'm sure I'm spelling that wrong, Chimbo. It is a big part of the Ossining community. And there'll be another one, sure as heck, someday in the future. Ossining is an immigrant community. It always has been. I suspect it always will be. And that's one of the things that makes it both interesting and sometimes with a language issue, it's challenging for the people who serve the community, largely because of some language issues we've had to overcome in the past. But it's worth it. It's great. It's one of the things that makes us different in this portion of the county, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So does anybody have any questions for me?
Scott,
All right.
we had a few
Yes.
questions in that chat box.
Okay.
So maybe just quickly, one was, were the Portuguese attracted to Ossining because of the fishing? And, they have the coastline and everything. They're big fishermen. Is that part of the attraction?
I don't believe they were.
Okay.
I know that's why there are communities in places like New Bedford and places like that. And I don't, the Portuguese, unlike a lot of the other groups, did not come from a single place in Portugal. I don't know what started that relationship. And Ossining does have a big Portuguese, Ossining and Newark, of all places.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know why they came here, but it wasn't for the commercial fishing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Someone suggested a food crawl is needed to celebrate the cuisines of Ossining, maybe a library fundraiser. I'm definitely looking into that. Thank you, Nancy. Someone also had the question, this is from Liz, when was the penitentiary built and why was Ossining chosen for it?
The penitentiary was built because of the ability to mine Sing Sing marble. It's a dolomitic limestone. At the time, 1825, 1826, they expected prisoners to make money. And so they brought them here specifically because there's an outcrop of what we call inwood marble. They called Sing Sing marble here. It was for economic reasons at the time. It was still Mount Pleasant. It was Mount Pleasant Penitentiary. When the economic viability of the Sing Sing marble ran out, they tried to move Sing Sing. So they were going to move them in 1908 up to where the Bear Mountain Inn is today. And they were going to reduce Bear Mountain to number 4 gravel so they could continue to have the prisoners, pay their way. But Mrs. Harriman came clip-clopping over the hill, saw that, told them if they left, she'd give them all to it as a state park. They put them back on the ship, back to Ossining, where they are today, and that's why we have Harriman State Park. But it was economics. That's why they came here. That's why they tried to move them. But it's obviously not that anymore, but that's why they were originally here.
Quick question. What street is Columbus Lodge on?
It's on North Highland Avenue. It's right directly behind us, what we call the Hollow. It's down by the Killbrook or the Sing Sing Kill, whatever you want to call it. Like I said, that brick structure's been there since the 1920s. And I lived up on Prospect Avenue in the 90s. My next door neighbor didn't speak a word of English. He spoke all Italian. And, not uncommon here at all.
Yeah. April had a question. Who is Louis Engel for the park? You know, the Engel Park?
Louis Engel, I believe, was a county or town legislator. Sergeant Wall would know, but I'm not sure. I think he was a politician.
Yeah. And Nancy reminded us that the White Plains Library had done a program on the Lenape people, and she put in the chat box the website, thelenapecenter.com. So take a look at that.
There is a Lenape Center. I think it's located in Albany, or it has a presence here, even though the Muncie Stockbridge are in Wisconsin. That is, recognition as an official tribe by the federal government is a big deal, and it can be contentious at times. The Lenape absolutely existed here in some form. Were the Sink Sink or the Kiktawank or the Mohican Lenape? I don't know if we know that for a fact. What we know for a fact is that they spoke Muncie. They were Algonquin people. They had a relationship with the Lenape tribes. Who they were, I don't know. The problem is, we wrote their history 100 years after they were gone, and so applied our terminology, our phonetic spelling to them, and in many respects, it wasn't accurate.
Scott, I'm going to stop sharing so we can see people, and they can, I'm going to see if I can spotlight Scott here so everyone can see him better. And if people want to click the little raise hand icon and ask Scott some more questions, that would be great. And I have one. What, Scott?
So my old patrol sergeant is silently judging me from New Hampshire right now.
Scott, what about the Irish in Ossining? You briefly touched on them.
They're certainly here. They come here in the 1840s to build the old Croton Aqueduct. The Italians came here in 1900 to build the new Croton Dam. The old Croton Dam is completed in 1842, runs right through town, went originally to where the New York Public Library is today. And that was the big infrastructure. Most of that was built by the Irish. And of course, whole cop thing. So, but they were earlier. They were the middle of the 19th century.
Thanks. Scott mentioned this. I just want to point this out. We just got this. This is very unique for the library, but fantastic for our community. We now have a Quechua de Huaraz, a town in, actually this is in Peru, in Spanish-English dictionaries. So it's pretty amazing. It's by Menandra Mosquera. She's a librarian. So we're really pleased that we now have that dictionary.
I will say that if you want to be a true student of Ossining culture, you should definitely make sure you eat paella and you should eat koi. I've had both. I prefer one over the other, but worth trying out at least once. Like I said, May 3rd at 7:30. Joyce Schrock-Cole is doing the talk about Captain Brady for the Jug Tavern Historical Society, and it's an incredible story. Please watch it. If you have any questions at all, I work here. I'm the only Scot in the library, and we are working heavily on our local history collection, which we'd like you all to come in and take a look at. And if you have any questions for me, just shoot me an email. And thanks for coming today. I'm going to go out and enjoy this beautiful day now.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much. I want to be sure that you also check out our website, ossininglibrary.org. We have under digital library, we have LibGuides that show Ossining, the history of Ossining information, some other websites, books, everything. We have an African American history. Of course, we have book recommendations, everything. A virtual potluck program that you would come to if you like that food part. And we hope to see you at our other virtual programs. And thank you everyone so much for coming, and be well.
Thank you so much. Have a good weekend, everybody.
All righty. Bye-bye now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Thanks, April.